Welcome to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Perhaps no military unit draws more fascination and commands more respect than the U.S. Navy SEALs. Surviving and passing the grueling training is one of the greatest accomplishments that can be achieved in our armed forces. But most of those who enter basic underwater demolition or BUDS training don't make it. The mental and physical grind over many weeks is just too much, and many of them tap out during what's known as Hell Week. So, what happens during this critical week and at other points in the training, and what separates the men who get through it from those who don't? That's the focus of the new book, Hell Week and Beyond, The Making of a Navy SEAL by Scott McEwen. While not a SEAL himself, McEwen has spent a lot of time with SEALs, and he is perhaps best known for authoring American Sniper with Navy SEAL and sniper Chris Kyle. And Scott, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, obviously the SEALs are an elite unit and are seen by many as the very best of the best. But what is the specific draw for young men to be a SEAL? What is it about SEALs that inspires so many young men to want to become one and the rest of us to imagine what it's like to be one?
I think it's a combination of different things. I think that now that the SEALs have become more, if you will, known, that a lot of guys try to think, well, I can make that. I'm tough. I can get through that. I can run fast and swim. And then I think there's a group that just, are from Navy SEAL parents, which we have a lot of legacy. I think there's a lot of guys whose parents were also SEALs. So, to be like, if you will, dad. And then I think the last group is just patriotic guys that really want to test themselves and become what is perceived to be, and rightfully so, one of the toughest crucibles in the United States military, if not the world.
And the rest of SEAL training is grueling in and of itself, but Hell Week takes on a special intensity, and that, of course, is the focus of the book. But what is the Navy's purpose of putting these SEAL candidates specifically through Hell Week?
I think it's part test and part training. In other words, I think it's more probably the test part, though. They front load this week at the end of the first month. So the United States military only has an investment, if you will, in a few weeks in these guys in this program, whereas by the end of SEAL training, which is 18 months, they're going to have roughly $1 million to $1.5 million per man invested, not including equipment, just in training costs per man. So I think they want to know right off the bat, as much as possible, whether these guys have the right stuff to get through the rest of it, because it doesn't get easier. And although this Hell Week is extremely difficult, the rest of the stuff they put the Navy SEALs through and the rest of, SEAL qualified training in BUDS is every bit as much and far more dangerous than even the Hell Week experience.
Let's talk a little bit about how you approach the book. First of all, you tell the story of Hell Week from the perspective of I believe, a teenage SEAL candidate from Texas. Why did you use that literary device?
I wanted to do it second person because I really wanted to get the audience inside this. I wanted people to feel as much as possible, as opposed to, a first person narrative or whatever. Then I went just to say, you then have to go do this. You then have to go, chew on this. You then have to go deep freeze yourself like that. So I wanted to put people kind of in the position of the guy that's trying to make it through and give them a feel for that. Because for me, that kind of makes you closer to the action, closer to the pain, and closer to the triumph at the end of this procedure.
You also tie the misery of Hell Week to the valuable lessons that it will provide in combat, and then you even broaden it out for people who aren't in the armed forces. Why did you decide to make those components such a big part of the book?
I wrote this during the COVID, and I saw a lot of people giving up. I saw a lot of people committing suicide. We all heard stories of a lot of really bad things and people losing their businesses and seeing no light at the end of the tunnel. And one of the things I really like about the Navy SEALs is, as long as there's a glimmer at the end of that tunnel, as long as there's something that you can go after, something you can mentally focus on, you're going to make it through. And I think that's one of the things I love about these guys is they bring that attitude to life as well. Once they get out, I know a lot of Navy SEALs that get out and go into many different aspects of business and personal life, but to a man, and I mean this, I don't know any of them that are not successful. And I mean, these guys go through business the same way they go through life. And that's something all of us can learn, because if you make that decision that you're never going to quit and you're going to win every single time you can, or at least give it your 100% best, 9 times out of 10, you're going to win.
One other thing about the style of the book is some people who might not be ready for it will notice the language is pretty coarse, but that's kind of the culture of what you're writing about here. So what do people need to know about that?
I didn't want to change the grit, and I consider language to be part of the grit. And when I say the grit, I mean, I put some stuff in here that's pretty tough about crawling through, somebody else's literal diarrhea and vomit and all the things that you have to go through in SEAL training. That's a part of this thing down there, and that you can't quit even though you are vomiting and, have diarrhea and sick as a dog, and probably would, if you're outside, would go to the hospital, if it's the average person. But I wanted people to feel that and almost taste it. And I felt the language was important too. And even though it is tough at times, it's the way these guys talk. I mean, it's the way they interact. It's not made for the PC world. It is what it is. And that's really what I wanted to capture.
Who decides if a candidate gets a shot at becoming a SEAL? Does everyone who wants a shot eventually get one, or do commanders decide from your early days in the Navy whether or not you ought to deserve that opportunity?
As I've heard many times, I was never in the Navy or in the military, but I've heard many times that the proverbial recruiter will always promise you the day. Anything you want, they'll say, oh, of course, if you want to be an astronaut, whatever, then of course, whatever. But, I think one of the things the Navy's got as a draw is to say, look, you can, as long as you can make certain minimal qualifications, running, speed, swimming speed, things of this nature, pull-ups, etc., you can go and try to be in the SEAL course. Now they make these guys get if you will, into minimal shape, which is probably basic training plus, but then they basically say that's enough for you to start the procedure. But they leave it pretty open, and and I don't know of a situation where the Navy has ever said to somebody, no, you can't do it, as long as you can pass those minimal physical qualifications to start the procedure.
You have talked to many, many different Navy SEALs. A lot of them are quoted in the book, in fact. From what you've heard from them, is there any way to adequately prepare physically, mentally, or otherwise for this?
It's kind of funny because, Ryan Zinke, who was a four-year Letterman Division I football, at University of Oregon, when he went to the SEAL training and joined up and ultimately became a commander at SEAL Team 6. And also a commander at BUDS, XO at BUDS. So he was the guy in charge of, the program, if you will, for a while. He said, all the physical training in the world, and we will get athletes there that are literally world-class Olympic level runners, swimmers, things of that nature. All that together, although it certainly helps you to prepare for it, the most important aspect and the most important, if you will, shape that you can get yourself is that 6 inches between the ears. And it really is that 6 inches between the ears that defines whether a SEAL makes it through this or he doesn't. And that's kind of one of the things I cover in the book is, whereas a lot of people may have physical limitations, if you keep that attitude that I will not quit, then you can make it. And I think that's what all SEALs have in common, even though there's SEALs that are 6'5", door kickers at 240 pounds, and there's guys that are 5'3" that are, every bit as lethal, but not quite the same body frame, if you will. Those guys can all be SEALs because they have one thing in common, and that's that 6 inches between the ears.
The SEAL training takes place in Coronado, California, and you describe what it's like, the stark change of your reality when you get there. What's the thing that the SEALs and the SEAL candidates talk about when they first get there and they realize life has really changed?
I think one of the things that you go through and you see is this transformation. And, while they're there in the workup, they have different shirts depending on whether you've been through Hell Week, whether you're in the first phase of BUDS, whether you're in a later phase of BUDS. Obviously, they have all that going on in Coronado because all SEALs are born there. And they, even though there's East Coast, West Coast teams, et cetera, everything comes from Coronado and from the BUDS school there, or BUDS training course, et cetera. But, it is, I think it's that transformation that you see, during this program, and and see how much physically you can take. And I think it's kind of daunting to see what these guys go through and to see how much their body really gets physically, taken to the limit and mentally taken to the limit. And that's really what they want in this program. They want you to drop on request. They want you to ring that bell. They want you out of there if you have any question in your mind that this is the wrong place for you to be. And they make it very clear. They'd love you to go get that cup of coffee and that hot donut and stop the pain and stop the training, if you will, because they want to know who that guy is and who that guy isn't.
You mentioned the bell. Talk about it a little bit, the ever-present bell that can make the misery stop, but also ends the dream of being a SEAL.
Yeah, I mean, and it's there all the time. They affix it to the back of the pickup truck when they're doing their, 10-mile rucksack, 50-pound backpack, on the sands of Coronado. They affix it to the back of the truck. So anytime you want to ring it, it's right there handy for you to just go up and ring the bell. And they want to make it that way so that when you get to that mental part, because a lot of times guys can come back, you can get to that bottom of your level of what you believe your body can take. And maybe that's just a moment. Maybe that's just a moment in time. And 10 minutes later, you're like, oh my God. And I hear this a lot, that the guy comes back and he says, I want to come back in. It's not the way it works. Once you ring the bell, you drop on request. That's it. You're done.
We're speaking with Scott McEwen. The book is Hell Week and Beyond, The Making of a Navy SEAL. I'm Greg Corombos, Veterans Chronicles. We'll be right back. This is Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Honored to be joined today by Scott McEwen, a prolific author on military stories. And of course, he's the co-author with Chris Kyle of American Sniper. His new book is Hell Week and Beyond, The Making of a Navy SEAL. And Scott, there are actually 4 weeks of SEAL training before Hell Week starts that also sound very, very difficult from what you write. What percentage of a SEAL class even makes it to Hell Week?
They'll lose roughly 75 to 80% of every class. So if 200 men start, by the end of Hell Week, they're generally down to about 40.
Wow, that's amazing. So one of the things you mentioned early on was some of the sickness and diseases that can happen. Specifically, it's called VGE. What is it? Why does it happen to them? And how badly does it immobilize these candidates?
It's a viral gastrointestinal disease. And it's very common down there. And I have a theory, and it's probably confirmed by doctors in Coronado and at SEAL training, but they don't like talking about it. But I have a theory that it's from Tijuana, the sewer of Tijuana. A lot of people don't realize it, but San Diego is a border town with Tijuana, which is one of the largest third world cities, in North America. And it frequently they dump, although we have built them sewer plants, frequently that metropolis of 3 to 5 million, depending if you count the cardboard shacks, dumps their sewer directly into the San Diego, southern bay of San Diego, and that makes itself into the Tijuana mud flats. And I believe that's the source of the VGE, but I haven't heard any government reports to confirm that. There's a lot of SEALs that'll tell you the same thing, that it's basically a virus that crawled out of the proverbial butt of Tijuana. But it's bad. It's very, very, very violent, kind of a flu type thing, and it's not grounds to be medicaled out of BUDS training.
Wow. So how does Hell Week start? There's a lot of things that you talk about early on. There's the waiting, the being forced into the cold surf. But what smacks you in the face first as a SEAL candidate?
Shock and awe. They basically bring machine guns in and start, open up with a saw, obviously with blanks and smoke bombs, whatever, probably flashbangs, depending on where you're exactly at, and say, here it is. And it's just shock and awe from that point. And essentially they get the guys mentally freaked out and keep them mentally freaked out as much as they can for the next 5 days straight, as well as awake.
What do these candidates find out about themselves? I mean, obviously, just about all of them, I assume, go in assuming they're going to make it. But you talked earlier about the no-quit attitude, and that's really what the commanders want to know. So describe the mindset needed to make it through and what happens in the minds of those who don't.
Yeah, I think maybe, Chris Kyle put it best. And, and Chris was describing to me one time a firefight that he was in I believe it was Fallujah, it might have been Ramadi, but essentially he was on a building and out doing, Overwatch, and was shooting for almost 2 days straight. And it was separated from the rest of the forces by a substantial amount of ground, but Chris was on the high ground and basically was in a position that was almost impossible for them to take out, with the exception of, the occasional, attempt with mortars, etc. But he was basically, in a very good hide and doing a very effective job of covering his troops. And, about 2 days into it, when he's bingo on water, he's bingo on ammo virtually, he's down to basically no food whatsoever, and but still fighting. His response was, there is no bell. There is no ability to ring the bell. There is no, if you will, extract from the bell. You just have to make a decision that, and make the decision there that you're not going to try to reach for the bell, because once you get into battle, there's no bell to ring. And that's really what they want from these guys.
And that's a good way of explaining what's going on with the instructors, because they're not just making you do tough things. They're in your face, like you said before, urging you to quit, wondering if you will do that. And the worse you do, the more they're on you, and even offering you medical care as a way to potentially tap out. So take us inside the mindset of the instructors here.
It's kind of strange, too, because I at least 3 of the guys in this book that I interviewed were instructors at Buds. And so they know it intimately. And, and all of them have differing attitudes. None of them are sadists. And there is the occasional guy that really kind of enjoys, and I don't think that's probably the official quote, whatever it is. But some people like to take pain to the other side more than others. None of these guys were that type of guy. All of them were command level. And so they all had to kind of keep that, if you will, down to a certain pace. If they had a guy that they knew was physically, on the edge, and they wanted him to make it through because they liked what they saw, they definitely, they don't choose preference or anything like that, but they definitely say, look, give him an hour to get a breath. Whatever, he almost died on that last rotation. That boat overturned on him coming in the surf. They were caught underneath the boat for 5 minutes, whatever else. Give this guy the chance to at least get a breath, because I want to see if he can make it through. So there is thought process to this, if you will, extremely difficult process. But I think the instructors want to make sure that they have that candidate, because all the instructors, at least the ones recently that are out there, all have, battle experience, and they could potentially be back, once they rotate out of that, if you will, part of the military, a Buds instructor, they could well be next to that guy in a firefight in Afghanistan or something like that. So they want to have the right stuff next to them that they believe is everybody as qualified as they were when they went through.
What do the candidates think of the instructors at the time? Maybe afterwards they have a different opinion. Do they come to hate them? Do they bond with each other in response to the challenge being faced? Or do they see these instructors as the gateway to the goal that they want to reach?
I think hatred is probably the first emotion. Maybe there's an understanding towards the end but when you're having that much pain inflicted on you by another human, and it's relentless, and they take advantage, like you said earlier, of those that are seemingly close to the edge and failing. I think that they definitely develop a almost warlike attitude towards the instructor, like as the enemy almost, because you have to. And, and a lot of guys have said the same thing, and a lot of the guys that make it have the same attitude. You can take me off of this course, but you're either going to take me unconscious and dead on a stretcher, or you're going to take me conscious on a stretcher where I can't move anymore. In other words, I've broken a limb, I've done this or that, but I am not going to walk off this course. And if you make that decision, the guys that do make that decision are the ones that seem to me that make it.
We'll talk much more about what the SEAL candidates go through when we come back. We're talking with Scott McEwen. The book is Hell Week and Beyond, The Making of a Navy SEAL. I'm Greg Corombos. This is Veterans Chronicles. This is Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Our guest this week is Scott McEwen. His latest book is Hell Week and Beyond, The Making of a Navy SEAL. We've been talking about the very demanding physical training and mental skills that are required to make it through Buds training. But let's talk about some of the specific things now that they put these candidates through, Scott. And we'll get to the boats in a moment, but talk about working with the logs and having to carry these logs as a team over sand dunes and so forth, and especially loose sand that drives so many people to quit.
Yeah, I think physically that's that and the boats are probably where they basically have to have the boats on their heads for miles and miles and miles. I think those two, if you will, physical procedures are probably two of the more difficult on the body. And I talk about in mine a situation where one of the guys drops his end of the log, which causes my guy, the second person aspect, to take a back disc and have it bulged out to the point where it bulges out and ruptures a disc in his back, which is a very, very difficult and at best debilitating hospital procedure. But he ends up going through the rest of Bud's with that injury, knowing that if he was 3 days in, he did not want to even take a medical and have to go back through the nightmare, because if you took a medical, then they would make you go back through the whole thing. And he could have done it, but he opted not to, and just went through with the pain from a ruptured disc for the rest of the procedure. But it kind of shows you that commitment to the pain and to the suck, if you will, and just saying, I'm going to get through it no matter what. And the ability of these guys to block out that pain, to me, is it's superhuman, if not crazy.
It certainly is when you read this book, and you describe it so well and so vividly. Let's talk about one of the unfortunate things that happens sometimes with these exercises, and that's what's known as boat ducking. There's a person in the book, Ensign Price, who I'm guessing is a composite character from people that the people you talk to have dealt with over the years. But explain what it is, how it happens, and how the other candidates react to it.
Well, one of the things I love about this procedure, and I say that, I've never been through it, but what I really stand in awe is, it doesn't matter if you're an admiral's son or a senator's son or a Naval Academy graduate or a kid coming off the street in Ohio and having, and basically had a tough home life and whatever else, it doesn't matter. Once you're in the middle of this, you are a candidate and you must go through the same thing. And when you get somebody that is that, if you will, that senator's son, and the ensign that's whatever, or the kid that's boat ducking, not taking his share of the weight, that's another thing they want to know from this procedure, is they want to know the guys on the team that are going to be there when you need them to be there, because obviously you're a limited force. You need to have everyone in the force contribute to it, or you will have a weak link, which can be a real big danger on certain operations that these guys have to do. So they make sure that all these men trust each other and they equally give up. And if you boat duck, in other words, don't carry the weight that you're supposed to carry, then they expect the other guys to run you out of the teams, because they don't want that in that team. They don't want them in the teams. They want the guy that's going to be there, that's going to be doing the tough work with the men, no matter if he's an officer or enlisted or whatever else. He's got to have that same attitude. And that's one of the things I think that really does separate this from possibly other, if you will, endeavors, is that they do not allow, no matter what your, if you will, background is, you to get through easy.
Yeah, you talk a lot in the book about how the SEAL candidates, as beaten and bruised and exhausted as they are, they will lift each other up, with the exception of a situation like this. How many of the SEALs that you talked with dealt with a boat ducker, either in their specific group with the log or the boat, or just in their class?
I think most of them have seen it, and most of them washed out. Most of those guys washed out, and they made sure they washed out. In other words, collectively as a group, they need to have that guy that's pulling the same thing on the line, on the offensive line of the football team. You need to have that fourth quarter attitude, like, this guy can make it through, and he'll be there in the fourth quarter for the team. And that's kind of the team that they want created. And I think this is a very effective means of doing it, because the instructors actually encourage them to run that guy out if that guy's not doing his job, that they as a team can make those decisions, that the group has to have the strongest candidates, the strongest people within it. And the instructors encourage, if you will, if not tacitly okay, that type of behavior on behalf of the guys trying to make it through.
It's an interesting contrast. You have some quotes in your book about the instructors and the commanders wanting to really test these guys to see who will quit and who will never quit. But then later on in the training, there's a big focus on performance, and the winners get rewarded, and the worse you do, the more you get beat on, and then you got to go back and do it again. You got to do your push-ups and everything. So what's the balance between gutting it out and actually excelling?
I think it's both. I think it's, and I think and that's one of the more interesting things that I find too, is while the collective team performance is obviously the goal, individual performance within that team is encouraged, if not rewarded. And I think that they want to always strive to be the best. They always want that guy to be the best. And you find that later on in their training as well. They want you to shoot the best. They want you to move the best. They want you swim the best. They want you to finish this as well as it is, because, this is not a world where everyone gets a trophy, but it is a world where they want those that are the best at what they do to be recognized and looked up to, even amongst their own group. And I like that. I like that not everybody does get a trophy. And I like the fact that they still acknowledge personal achievement within the group, because ultimately, isn't that what life is about? I mean, from my perspective, that's one of the things we can learn from the SEALs. And one of the lessons I tried to tell people is, look, man, there's nothing wrong with not everybody gets a trophy, because it encourages those that can excel in our society to excel and be rewarded for that that performance and that, if you will, accomplishment.
Let's go back for a moment to some of the physical punishment that these candidates endure. We've talked about the gastrointestinal. We've talked about bulging and sometimes fractured vertebrae. Talk about the fatigue, the muscles, and other physical and mental challenges they go through.
Yeah, and once again, I haven't been through it, but I can, I've heard the stories, and I think one of the more difficult challenges that they have in this whole thing is the hypothermia. I mean, these guys, they take them right down, and this is very well medically looked into, and they've got it down, these rotations, to know that if the water is 52 degrees in the Pacific, or whatever the exact temperature is, and it will vary plus or minus probably 5-6 degrees depending on which class is going and when, but they know exactly how long a man could stay in that and without suffering severe hypothermia. And obviously they don't want to deep freeze somebody to the point where they're actually go into hypothermia, but they want to take you right to that level, because that's an extremely painful and extremely difficult to mentally function when you're suffering from hypothermic conditions. And so they really want to know the guys that can do it. And that's one of their more effective, if you will, quitting techniques. I would say that possibly even up to 50% of the guys that actually drop on request, it's because they just can't take the cold. And, a lot of kids, and I was talking to a SEAL team buddy of mine that's from Montana, of which Ryan Zinke and Robert O'Neill, who double tapped bin Laden, both from Montana. But a lot of northern climate boys seem to be able to handle this a lot better because they're just more used to the cold.
Well, that's an important point as well. If they're a little bit adapted to it before they get there, that certainly helps. One of the things, of course, that these prospective SEALs desperately want during Hell Week is to sleep. And they're given a chance to do that for 2 hours, but it actually is more physically agonizing than if they had gotten no rest at all at that point.
Yeah, I think, I couldn't really get a medical, lowdown on that. And I talked to one of the doctors out there one of the times, and I said, look, are you saying that it's physically necessary to get 2 hours every 5 days, or you're going to cause brain damage? Or is it, or is that, just something he's like, I don't know if 2 hours is going to make a difference one way or the other. But I'll tell you this right now, getting up and rolling after you take that 2 hours is extremely mentally difficult. In other words, is it more difficult to go to bed after you've been awake for that long, or is it more difficult to force yourself to get up and once again not ring the bell, but go back to this terror, if you will, of rotations physically and mentally?
It's Hell Week, and so day 4 is on the second half of this. But you say that at that point, the mindset kind of kicks in that if you haven't quit, nothing's going to make you quit, assuming that you don't have some physical injury that forces it. So why does that seem to be the point where the resolve gets really locked in?
I think it's because the guys know that at that point in time, there's not a lot of new crap, if you will, that can be thrown in their direction. They know basically the cards that can be played. They know how they can play them. They know just about how long they can play them, and they know the kind of angle that they're gonna come at them from. So I think that mentally, and I've heard this from many of the guys, they start believing at that time that they can make it. In other words, once you get through to that 4th day, because you only got one more real day of this hell to go, that no matter what they do, you feel like you can at least get through to that next day.
One of the things that's also interesting around that time is you have all these candidates that come into SEAL training and their focus is on, I'm going to make it through. I've got this mindset, and that's a big part of it. But it's also building the team idea, the team atmosphere, and obviously the boats and the log work is part of building that. And there's a really powerful moment where these guys are locking arms in the surf, just getting crushed by these frigid waves, where the teamwork and the brotherhood really seems to be kicking in.
Yeah, I think that's the other part of it too. Is, I mean, they say many different military crucibles. For example, Ranger, or Green Beret, or some other Marine trainings, et cetera, that are extremely difficult as well. Don't get me wrong. I'm not denigrating or in any way diminishing what those guys go through to make it through their process, but they say that a lot of it is breaking the man down and then remaking the man as part of a team. And it's certainly true here. I mean, I think that they want this group of guys, and I find the guys that have been through a BUD/S class together and that make it through, that those guys are bonded for the rest of their life, even more especially than your average SEAL would be, just because of the SEAL experience. I think those guys are very, very close, and they never really fall out of that.
We're talking with Scott McEwen. The book is Hell Week and Beyond. And Scott, some might think that when you get to the last day, they kind of ramp down to the final hours. But no, the last day is actually the toughest. What are they looking for as they drive these guys even harder? It's obviously the no quit. It's the teamwork. It's a lot of things. But why is the last day intensified even more?
I think it's just like everything else. I mean, isn't life about closing? Isn't life about the guys that make it and the women that make it, the ones that close the deal, the fourth quarter? It's good to have a game in the first quarter and the second quarter and everything else, but the teams that really make it, let's face it, the guys that are there in the fourth quarter, and that can still bring the goods when they're under the worst amount of stress and worst amount of strain, that they're able to still get it done. I mean, that's really what these guys are looking for. And so they don't diminish it. They don't download it, if you will, towards the end. They upload it to make sure that they really do have those guys that they want by the end of this procedure. And remarkably, they do. I mean, these guys are truly, amazing warriors and amazing physical and mental, if you will, specimens that can go through a hell of a lot of stuff. And once they've done this, I mean, they know that there's very little in the world that can be thrown at them that they haven't already seen or felt or experienced.
Scott, there's, I'm sure, a lot of different parts of the book when we read what people are going through, where a lot of us would say, I don't think I could endure that. But there's one in there, at least for me, that's you have to be kidding me, and that's going back to VGE, and it's specifically described on the last day, but I would guess this could happen at any point during the training, is that when guys have to relieve themselves through one end or the other, they're not sent to a bathroom, they're sent into the ocean. And then at least in your book, on the last day, the candidates themselves are then sent out into the ocean and dunking themselves in the water where all of this waste was eliminated. I assume it's because you never know what conditions you'll find yourself in combat, and so you have to be mentally prepared to deal with anything. But how did you react to that? How do they react to that? How do they actually convince themselves to do it?
Well, that's a true scene. That's I don't know how often that happened or happens, but it certainly happened during the one that was being described to me, and that was accurate. And I know for a fact it was accurate. So, it's interesting that basically you've completely separated yourself from bodily function. In other words, you've separated yourself from all degree of humility, from all degree of, if you will, sanity, everything else. You've immersed yourself in this world, and you've literally immersed yourself in the excrement, in the proverbial crap, and you're willing to do that. And so I just, it's one of the things that I just over and over think to myself, what more can you throw at these guys? What more happens later that these guys aren't able to take? And isn't that what these guys are really looking for? Isn't that what these men, that the trainers are looking for? Is that guy that, nothing is going to freak him out. Nothing is going to stop him. Nothing, that would otherwise cause social norms to be, if you will, violated. There is no such thing anymore. It doesn't exist in their world.
Absolutely fascinating to read about. When we come back, we'll talk about the good part of Hell Week when it ends, and we'll be right back with that. We're talking with Scott McEwen. The book is Hell Week and Beyond, The Making of a Navy SEAL. I'm Greg Corombos, and this is Veterans Chronicles. You are listening to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Our guest this week is Scott McEwen. The latest book he has written is Hell Week and Beyond, The Making of a Navy SEAL. So, Scott, these candidates, the ones that endure, go through 6 days of hell, and then ultimately it ends just as quickly as it started. Explain how it ends.
They call the guys out on the beach, and basically those that remain say, Hell Week is secured, and the guys literally, many of them are literally fall to the ground, and either by adrenaline finally shutting off or whatever reason. I don't think it has anything to do with histrionics. It's literally your body is taking you this far, and many of them have to go directly to medical. I mean, they basically tell these guys they got to lay down and put their feet up so they don't have too much of a situation where the blood coagulates in their feet, and they give them a week off if they need it, or a week off period, to recover physically, and more if you need medical attention. Say, for example, the guy in ours, he had to roll back into the next class after that, because he had to take 6 weeks off due to a ruptured disc in his spine and treatment that he had to have. And so basically they lick their wounds and then go right back at it. And that's one of the things I want to let people know is, while you're done and think, oh, I've made it, that's only the first month of 18 months, and the rest of it is every bit as difficult. Maybe not as physically or mentally difficult as far as the tolling is concerned, but certainly more dangerous, learning weapons, bombs, explosives, jumping out of airplanes at night, all the other things that go into making a Navy SEAL, night dives with dragger, rebreather devices, extremely difficult and dangerous things, which they actually more dangerous than this procedure as far as actual loss of life and injury. But it's a blue man's game. I mean, it's a blue collar game. In other words, you got to earn that every day, that trident, and you really got to keep yourself in physical and mental shape to get through the rest of it. So while it ends, it really only just began.
Yeah, that's an important point. Surviving Hell Week does not make you a Navy SEAL. There's a lot more, months and months and months, over a year more, until you can get the trident. And there's plenty of opportunities for you to wash out, even though you survived Hell Week. So that's a lot to keep in mind as well. What's the feeling like when you realize you did it? You've had this mindset that I got to get through this. I got to get through this. I got to get through this. And that probably leads to the exhilaration and the emotions on the beach. But coming to the realization that you survived Hell Week, what do the guys say about that?
I think it's interesting because you see so many different reactions from different guys. And, I think it's one of, I'm going to call somebody and tell them, a parent, loved one or whatever else. But, they all are kind of let down because they really kind of realize, unless that parent actually has been through it and he is also a Navy SEAL or whatever, nobody will really understand what you've accomplished. Nobody will really get it, like, oh, okay, I made it, whatever else. I made it through this week, whatever, it's like there's almost like a situation where you don't know who it is you can call and tell that you made it and that they would appreciate what you've been through. And it's almost a situation where they don't need to call anybody. Like they know personally that they've made it. They know personally that they've accomplished this and that. And that's really kind of the evolution of the man that I see uniformly amongst all of them is, I made it through this crap. And by God, I don't know if there's anything more they throw at me like it, but if I can make it through this, I can make it through anything in life. And that's kind of the message of the book, is that attitude, like, we're all going to go through hell. Not all of us are going to be Navy SEALs, but we sure as hell can learn from these guys.
A couple questions left in our conversation with Scott McEwen. The book is Hell Week and Beyond. We talked about how the candidates pretty much come to hate the instructors who are constantly screaming in their face. The chief villain in this book is a instructor named Joker, who's constantly on the megaphone berating and urging him to quit and just getting on him all the time. But once Hell Week is secured and they yell that on the beach, the instructors, they drop the mask. They become their regular selves. They congratulate the guys. How do the candidates react to that? Do they sense an instant brotherhood? Does it take a while because they've hated these people so intensely for a week? Or what's the reaction like?
I don't think that the dislike for maybe the individual acts is over immediately, but as they grow to be SEALs and as they grow to be men in the SEAL teams and understand how difficult it is overall, I think they grow to appreciate the fact that they make it difficult for a reason, because it really is just emblematic of more that's expected of you later on. So while it is extremely difficult and there's a lot of, if you will, seemingly sadistic behavior, on these guys' part, that maybe it's the right thing to do, because they know that the guy that either they're doing it or that guy they've never met before that went through it 3 years before or 3 years after they did, they know when that guy shows up, he can deliver the goods. They know immediately that guy can grab whatever weapon is thrown at him, load it, fire it, and keep firing it for the next 3 days straight, and he will not quit. So they realize that once that crucible, if you will, has been done that they can depend on any one of those guys that's been through the same thing. And that's really what it's about, too.
Scott, it's obvious from our conversation today, certainly from reading this book and reading your other books, the great admiration and respect you have for the SEALs. What more than anything else do you want your readers to take away from this?
You know, what I tried to impart in this work, and it was difficult because when you're writing in the second person, sometimes you lose, you know, your narrative and your prose, if you will. I wanted people to really appreciate the fact that these guys made a decision to do something. But the biggest decision of all, and the most important decision of all, is that decision that not only am I not going to quit, but by God, I'm gonna get this done. I'm going to accomplish this goal. And I find so many times in our society now, and you know, maybe in this generation or whatever else, but certainly not in my father's generation. He was in World War II. That we had that attitude as Americans that we're going to accomplish the goal, and you know, and I see us losing that in our society. One of the reasons I wanted to write this book was to say there are those that we should look up to that will not accept anything but winning and will not quit until they achieve that goal. And maybe all of us can learn from that. And that would be something good for this country as a whole. And I really believe that.
Absolutely fascinating to learn about what our elite military forces, and in this case specifically the Navy SEALs, go through, not only to pursue their dream, but to be the very best of the best in defending this country. Scott, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for the book, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk again down the road. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, and keep bringing the word. We need it, and keep supporting the military. That's what I do every day, and I love the Americans, you know, in this country that do the same thing, because that's what we need to do.
Outstanding. Scott McEwen is the author of Hell Week and Beyond, The Making of a Navy SEAL. I'm Greg Corombos, and this is Veterans Chronicles. Hi, this is Greg Corombos, and thanks for listening to Veterans Chronicles, a presentation of the American Veterans Center. For more information, please visit AmericanVeteransCenter.org. You can also follow the American Veterans Center on Facebook, and on Twitter, we're at AVC Update. Subscribe to the American Veterans Center YouTube channel for full oral histories and special features. And of course, please subscribe to the Veterans Chronicles podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and please join us next time for Veterans Chronicles.